If I'm being completely honest with you, I used to be my own worst financial enemy. I spent years wondering why I couldn't get ahead, despite working long hours and making what I thought was a decent salary. I was stuck in a cycle of one step forward, two steps back. And it wasn't because of the economy or my boss. It was because of a series of toxic money mistakes I was making every single day. The moment I stopped making these mistakes was the moment my bank account finally started to breathe. The first and most painful mistake I stopped making was emotional spending. I used to use shopping as a way to regulate my feelings. If I had a stressful day at work, I felt like I deserved a new pair of shoes or a fancy dinner to compensate for my misery. If I was bored, I'd scroll through Amazon and buy things I didn't even know existed 5 minutes prior. I was essentially trying to fill an internal void with external possessions, and it never worked. The high of the purchase lasted maybe an hour, but the credit card bill lasted for months. I had to learn that treating yourself is a reward for hitting a goal, not a consolation prize for having a bad day. Once I replaced the habit of shopping with the habit of going for a walk or journaling, I saved nearly $400 a month. I realized that my emotions are temporary, but my financial decisions have permanent consequences. I also stopped the mistake of ignoring small recurring costs. I used to think that a $10 streaming service or a $5 app subscription didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But when I actually sat down and looked at my statement, I realized I had over 15 different subscriptions I barely used. That's nearly $200 a month vanishing into thin air. Over a year, that is $2,400. That is a vacation or a significant contribution to an emergency fund. I stopped the set it and forget it mentality and started being a ruthless auditor of my own cash flow. Now, if I don't use a service at least 3 times a week, it gets canceled immediately. This mistake is a silent killer of wealth because it's invisible. It doesn't feel like a big purchase, so your brain doesn't trigger a warning, but it's the death by 1,000 cuts. By stopping this, I plugged the leaks in my boat and finally started moving forward. I also learned to stop budgeting in my head. I used to think I had a good grasp on my spending just by glancing at my banking app once a week. I was wrong. We are hardwired to underestimate our spending and overestimate our savings. When I finally moved to a written, zero-based budget, I discovered I was spending double what I thought I was on groceries and gas. Seeing the numbers in black and white removed the optimism bias and forced me to deal with reality. It was uncomfortable at first, but it was the most empowering thing I've ever done for my future. The second major mistake I stopped making was buying things to impress people I don't even like. This is the classic American trap. We live in a culture of comparisonitis, where we feel the need to keep up with the Joneses, or more accurately, the people on Instagram. I used to feel an immense pressure to have the latest phone, the trendiest clothes, and a car that looked successful, even if it meant I was drowning in high-interest debt behind the scenes. I was essentially trading my future freedom for a fleeting moment of social validation from people who weren't even paying attention to me. The day I stopped caring about what others thought of my lifestyle was the day I became truly wealthy. I realized that the people worth impressing are impressed by your character and your intelligence, not the brand of your watch. By keeping my car for 10 years instead of trading it in every 3, I saved tens of thousands of dollars in interest and depreciation. This mistake is deeply psychological, and it's the reason so many high earners in America are actually broke. They are high-income poor. They have the big house and the luxury SUV, but they have zero assets and massive stress. I decided I'd rather be invisible wealthy than visible broke. I also stopped waiting for the perfect time to invest. I used to tell myself that I'd start investing once I reached a certain salary or once the market cooled down. I was trying to time the market, which is a loser's game. By waiting for the perfect moment, I missed out on years of compound growth. I finally realized that time in the market is infinitely more important than timing the market. I stopped overthinking and started a simple, automatic monthly contribution into a broad market index fund. Whether the market is up or down, the money goes in. This removed the emotional roller coaster of investing and allowed me to focus on my life while my wealth grew in the background. If you're waiting for the stars to align before you start building your future, you're going to be waiting forever. The best time to start was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. I also stopped the mistake of ignoring my credit score. I used to think it didn't matter because I didn't plan on taking out loans. But a poor credit score affects everything in America, from your car insurance premiums to your ability to rent a decent apartment or get a competitive mortgage rate. By being proactive, paying my bills on time, and keeping my credit utilization low, I save myself thousands of dollars in hidden costs. A good credit score is like a discount code for life. It makes everything cheaper and opens doors that are closed to everyone else. It's a tool that you have to learn how to use rather than a monster you try to hide from. Once I took control of that number, my financial options expanded overnight. I was no longer a victim of the system. I was a participant who knew the rules of the game and how to win it. The third mistake I stopped making was failing to negotiate. In our society, we often treat prices as if they are written in stone. We pay the sticker price for cars, the listed rate for internet, and the first salary offer we receive. I realized that by not negotiating, I was leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table over the course of my career. I started making it a habit to ask for a better rate or a discount whenever it was appropriate. I learned the power of no. When I called my service providers and told them I was looking for a better deal, they suddenly found promotions that weren't available before. When I changed jobs, I spent just 10 minutes negotiating my starting salary and landed an extra $5,000 a year. That 10-minute conversation was the highest paying 10 minutes of my entire life. Most people are afraid of the awkwardness of negotiation, but you have to realize that the person on the other side of the table is just doing their job. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. By stopping the habit of being a passive consumer, I became an active participant in my financial life. I also stopped treating my savings account like a checking account. I used to move money into savings at the start of the month, only to move it back a week later because I needed something. I didn't have a savings problem, I had a discipline problem. I fixed this by moving my emergency fund to an entirely different bank that didn't have an easy-to-use app. This created friction. If I wanted to touch that money, I had to wait 2 business days for the transfer to go through. That delay was enough to stop 90% of my impulsive withdrawals. It allowed my savings to actually grow and fulfill its purpose. I also stopped the mistake of not having a will or insurance. We like to think we are invincible, but life is unpredictable. I used to think I was saving money by not paying for life or disability insurance. In reality, I was just gambling with my family's future. One bad accident or illness could have wiped out everything I had worked for. Getting the proper coverage gave me a peace of mind that you can't put a price tag on. It's about building a roof over your financial house before it starts raining. Without protection, your wealth is just a house of cards waiting for a gust of wind. I also stopped ignoring my taxes. I used to just hand my documents to a tax preparer once a year and hope for the best. Now, I spend a few hours every quarter understanding the tax implications of my decisions. I learned about deductions, credits, and tax-advantaged accounts like the HSA. This allowed me to legally keep more of the money I earned. In America, your biggest expense isn't your rent or your car, it's your taxes. Learning how to optimize them is one of the most profitable skills you can ever learn. It's the difference between building wealth for yourself and building wealth for the government. The fourth mistake I stopped making was valuing price over quality. I used to be cheap instead of being frugal. There is a massive difference. Being cheap means buying the lowest priced item regardless of its longevity. I would buy $10 shoes that fell apart in 3 months, and then I'd buy another pair. Over 2 years, I'd spend $80 on shoes that were uncomfortable and looked terrible. Now I buy a high-quality pair for $100 that lasts me 5 years. I actually saved $60 by spending more up front. This is the Boots theory of socioeconomic unfairness. By stopping the cycle of disposable consumption, I save money and reduce the clutter in my life. I started applying this to everything, from my kitchen appliances to my laptop. I buy the best I can afford, and I take care of it so it lasts. This shift in mindset stops you from being a frequent visitor to the store and turns you into a long-term owner. I also stopped lending money to friends and family. This might sound harsh, but I realized that lending money often destroys the very relationships you're trying to help. When the person can't pay you back, it creates a cloud of guilt and resentment that hangs over every interaction. Now I follow a simple rule. If someone I love needs money and I have it, I give it as a gift with no strings attached. If I can't afford to gift it, I don't give it. This preserves the relationship and removes the debt dynamic from my personal life. It also keeps my finances predictable. I no longer have outstanding loans that I'm counting on to pay my own bills. I also stopped the mistake of relying on a single stream of income. I used to think a steady job was the ultimate security, but the reality is that having only one income source is the riskiest thing you can do. If that one source disappears due to a layoff or a company closure, you are at zero. I started building side hustles and investing in dividend-paying stocks and rental properties. I wanted to create a financial safety net where no single event could ruin me. By diversifying my income, I reduced my stress levels and increased my confidence. I no longer felt like a slave to my employer because I knew I had other options. This mistake, relying on one paycheck, is what keeps people trapped in toxic work environments. When you have multiple streams of income, you have the power to walk away. That is the ultimate form of leverage in the modern world. It's not about being greedy, it's about being resilient. I stopped being a fragile financial entity and started becoming anti-fragile. Someone who can actually benefit from chaos and change because I have multiple ways to win. This required a lot of work in the beginning, but the long-term payoff is a level of freedom that most people will never know. I stopped being a passive observer of my life and started being the active architect of my financial fortress. The fifth and final mistake I stopped making was focusing on the goal instead of the system. I used to be obsessed with the idea of having $1,000,000. I would look at that number and feel overwhelmed because I was so far away from it. I was constantly checking my progress and feeling like a failure because I wasn't there yet. I finally realized that the goal doesn't get you to the finish line. The system does. James Clear says, "You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems." I stopped worrying about the big number and started focusing on the daily habits that lead to it. My system is simple. Automate my investments, track my spending every evening, meal prep on Sundays, and read for 20 minutes every day. If I follow the system, the $1,000,000 is an inevitable mathematical byproduct. By focusing on the process, I removed the anxiety of the outcome. I started finding joy in the discipline itself. I felt a sense of accomplishment every time I checked off my daily habits, regardless of what the market was doing. I also stopped ignoring my mental health in relation to money. I realized that my spending habits were often a symptom of my internal state. When I was anxious or depressed, my finances suffered. By investing in therapy and self-care, I actually improved my net worth. A healthy mind makes better decisions. I stopped the mistake of thinking I could do it alone. I started seeking out mentors, joining financial communities, and having open conversations about money with my friends. The taboo surrounding money in America only benefits the people who want to keep us broke. By sharing my mistakes and learning from others, I accelerated my progress by years. I realized that everyone is struggling with something, and there is no shame in asking for help or admitting you don't know how a Roth IRA works. Finally, I stopped being afraid to make mistakes. I realized that every financial failure was just a tuition payment to the University of Life. I stopped beating myself up over past credit card debt or missed opportunities. I acknowledged the mistake, learned the lesson, and moved on. The shame cycle is the biggest hurdle to financial recovery. If you're busy punishing yourself for the past, you don't have the energy to build the future. I forgave myself, and I gave myself permission to be a beginner. If you are currently making these mistakes, don't panic. You are exactly where you need to be to start your transformation. Every single one of these habits can be changed starting right now. You have the power to stop the leaks, ignore the crowds, and build a life of abundance. The only thing standing between you and your financial freedom is the decision to stop making the same old mistakes and start making new, better ones. I'm right here with you on this journey, and I promise you that the view from the top is worth the climb. Let's go build that future together, one correct decision at a time.